Hi everyone, I'm Bianna Goladriga, and this is a special pre-debate edition of Yahoo News Live. Well, what happens in Vegas tonight will definitely not stay in Vegas, as the much less crowded Democratic field takes the debate stage for the first time at the Wynn Hotel Casino. Frontrunner Hillary Clinton will be front and center as she continues to lead the national polls, followed by Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. But it's the other three names on the stage that may be hoping to use tonight to steal some of the attention. And then there's the extra podium in the room, the one CNN brought for non-candidate Joe Biden. And the question, will he or won't he? He'll certainly be watching, as will another name who will likely come up tonight, Donald Trump. The GOP frontrunner is promising to live tweet the entire time tonight, despite what he expects will be a, quote, boring 2 hours. Hunter Walker is a national correspondent for Yahoo News. He's live at the debate venue. And David Swerdlick is an assistant editor at the Washington Post. He's joining us from Washington, D.C. Gentlemen, welcome for a highly anticipated pre-show with us. So thanks for coming.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Bianna.
Hunter, let's start with you. What's the buzz from the Wynn Hotel Casino? Give us a taste of what's going on behind the scenes there, and who are people placing their bets on?
Well, you know, I'm in the press filing room right now, which is where reporters will be watching the debate. And the biggest thing I noticed coming in was there are these huge signs outside, and you see three faces on them: Anderson Cooper of CNN, Hillary Clinton, and Bernie Sanders. The other candidates are literally just footnotes here at the venue. But at the same time, I think they really need this moment the most because they do need to make a dent. So, you know, I think we can bet on seeing them try to make a bit of a scene.
And David, Hillary Clinton is certainly the most seasoned debater on stage tonight. There were 25 Democratic debates in 2008 Democratic primary season. How does that experience expected to help her tonight?
Yeah, I think that's a built-in advantage for her, Bianna. And I think going along with what Hunter just said, right, she has the opportunity here. Of course, she's going to have to perform well and be steady and, you know, lay out her ideas and answer some of the tough questions. But unlike Chafee and Webb and Governor O'Malley, she's not going to have to introduce herself to the American people, and to a lesser extent, neither is Senator Sanders. So I think Sanders and Clinton have a slightly easier task in that regard. The other three lower-tier candidates first have to let people know, I'm here and this is who I am, and maybe you've never heard of me. In terms of her advantage having debate experience, she's been on stage with who I think right now is still the best Democratic debater, President Barack Obama. And even though he bested her in 2008, she certainly held her own and certainly scored points against him in those Democratic primary debates, and that will serve her well going into tonight.
And Hunter, then there's of course, the private email controversy. As Politico reports, one longtime Clinton family advisor has called the emails a, quote, cancer on her campaign. Another is calling her her own worst enemy. Is she prepared to once again start answering questions, whether it's from Anderson Cooper or whether it's from those who she's running against, about the issue? And what kind of responses can we expect? Are they going to be apologetic or defensive?
Well, that Politico story detailed how there's been sort of discord within Hillary Clinton's campaign, with them not really sure how they should handle the response to the email revelations. And I didn't really find that surprising, because they've handled it like 30 different ways and they let this drag out so long. So you can kind of see from the outside that there wasn't really a unified response coming from the Clinton campaign. But I do think that they have settled on apologizing, being more accessible. I know, Bianna, we were talking yesterday about how we've seen her do more interviews, get more out there in these late night comedy settings, and be sort of more approachable. And I think that shift has also happened with how she's handled the email situation.
And I think another takeaway from that Politico article is that despite the number of advisors that she does have, some very high profile and powerful, at the end of the day, she is the decider in what happens during that campaign. David, I want to talk to you about the report in your paper that while serving as State Department Chief of Staff, Cheryl Mills also held a job negotiating with Abu Dhabi officials for NYU. Now, it's likely, I would assume, that the State Department had signed off on that, but still we saw similar news with her other aide, Uma Abedin. Does this add fuel to at least the optics that Clinton doesn't always play by the rules?
It does. It plays into a narrative. And when you're talking about the Mills story that we reported, or some of the reporting about Huma Abedin, right? There is this sense among some voters, and that has persisted throughout the summer as the campaign has really ramped up, that the Clinton camp, the people closest around Clinton, including Secretary Clinton herself, like you said, have not always played by the rules, that even if things have been technically within the letter of the law, that some of the way that they've gone about their business as a team has not always been in the spirit of doing the most for the greatest good, and maybe it's been a little more narrow toward the specific interests of the Clinton camp. And like Hunter said again, I think when those questions come tonight, she's going to have to pivot on those and say, look, we understand that these things have happened. We can't do anything about the past. We can't put the genie back in the bottle, but we apologize, and we want to move forward saying that we've done everything we can as a team, and Secretary Clinton at the top of that team, to address these things. Hopefully for them, whatever answer they give tonight, Bianna, is not going to be followed on by stories that come out between now and the next debate that contradict whatever she says in tonight's debate. I think that's her challenge, to get to the issues.
And that's a great unknown, because as we see, the emails keep leaking and coming out, and it's not over yet. Obviously, she's got that big hearing next week. But Hunter, meantime, the Clinton camp seems to be really agitated about the press covering those who are close to her. And there are reports that they're actively looking into aides of her opponents for any questionable actions on their part. So is there an argument that the press seems fixated on Hillary? And is that a valid argument?
Well, the Clintons have long thought that there was this media conspiracy and quote unquote vast right-wing conspiracy against them. And, to a degree, I think that is true. We did see throughout the Clinton administration these groups such as Newsmax, David Brock, who now switched over to being a Hillary ally, sort of relentlessly attack the Clintons and try to trudge up scandals. At the same time, there are some legitimate problems. I mean, as we were saying before, I think this Cheryl Mills story is very interesting. I think the continued mingling of revenue streams and other things that we've seen with the Clinton Foundation, with Sidney Blumenthal, who was trying to get a job in the State Department, doing off-the-books work for Hillary, also working with the Clinton Foundation. This stuff is very, very troubling. I actually think some of the financial and other questions surrounding the Clinton Foundation and their various aides are much more troubling than the email thing. What's interesting to me is that for voters, for the public, the email thing seems to have resonated on a much, much higher level. So to go back to your question, I do think there is a bit of a fixation on Hillary. It stems from three things. One, she's the overwhelming Democratic frontrunner, even if Sanders is surging a bit. Two, there has been a long sort of history with the Clintons. And three, there is, as they say, there is something for us to look at that we should be covering as reporters.
And David, I think a lot of people looking at this even a year or so ago said that one thing that would help Hillary is that as opposed to her opponents, she's been through it all. All the baggage is out. We know the skeletons in the closet. And yet here we are talking about emails, talking about her chief of staff, maybe having a conflict of interest, having dual jobs. This all seems pretty amateur given somebody who knew that she would be running for president of the United States, no?
Yeah, that is hurting what should have been one of her greatest strengths, that all the baggage and all the stories were already out there, and it was just going to be on to her presenting herself as the person to best take over in the shoes of President Obama and to best lead Democrats into the future. And instead, there's still this narrative about her emails and about her staff that's persisted. It can both be true that the media has fixated on her and that she and her camp have invited some of this fixation. I think one reason why the email story has resonated with the public, even if it may not be the most interesting or even if there's more smoke than fire, is because most regular Americans can identify with this idea of, hey, look, I have a work email account, which I use for work, and I have my personal email account that I use for personal stuff, and why it was so confusing, or what was the thinking behind her, you combining email streams and having a server at her house, which has never been it's been apologized for, but never fully explained, is something that I think that has left people wanting to know what gives, what was the deal. And if she can get past that quickly tonight, it'll be in her best interest.
And Hunter, her biggest rival tonight is obviously Vermont Senator Bernie Sanders. He's been attracting among the largest crowds of all the candidates, but this is certainly the most important crowd for him yet, is it not? And also, between him and Hillary, they have a long history together, having served in the Senate. Do you think he's going to bring up her record and views, which, as we know, have changed over the years?
Well, I do think the idea that Hillary Clinton is inauthentic or flip-flops is one of the major attacks we're going to see against her. I wouldn't be surprised to actually see O'Malley or some of the others try to do this. Interestingly, with Sanders, even though he is her biggest rival in the declared field so far, he's taken a pretty moderated tone with Secretary Clinton, and he's sort of gone easy on her almost. So it will be interesting to see if this is the moment where he really goes out swinging and doesn't just articulate his own view, but goes on the offensive against her.
And David, another name who has managed to get under the skin of both Republicans and Democrats, we've spent a lot of time talking about him, of course, is Donald Trump. His name is already all over the Vegas Strip. And Hillary Clinton made a surprise stop at a union strike outside of Trump's Vegas hotel yesterday. Here's what she had to say about Donald Trump.
Yeah, some people think Mr. Trump is entertaining, but I don't think it's entertaining when somebody insults immigrants, insults women. That is just unacceptable behavior. And so when we're here together in solidarity to organize, we also want to send a message to Mr. Trump that if you are going to run for president, then you should represent all the people of the United States.
So, David, we know that Donald Trump will be live tweeting throughout this, quote, boring debate tonight. But how do you expect his name to come up, if at all? We mentioned, obviously, that he's going to be focused on it. Are they going to be focused on him?
Well, if you're Secretary Clinton, I think you put Donald Trump and his live tweet stream out of your head during the debate. I think she was successful yesterday, actually, going sort of semi-impromptu to a union site that happened, a union protest that happened to be at a Trump property, making this sort of short, sweet speech about it. She was there for the average person, the average American worker. The key with Secretary Clinton is that she's got to be able to keep that up consistently as a campaigner. She can't just do that once and expect people to think all of a sudden she's a woman of the people. I think she's got to do that over and over again in debates and on the campaign trail. And if she does, she'll be sort of successful. And I think it's smart, Bianna, for her to put her focus on Donald Trump and the other Republican candidates rather than on Senator Sanders, because what she ultimately wants to do, in my view, is present herself as the candidate who can bring Democrats together, who can hold the Obama coalition that won in 2008 and 2012 together. And I think she's more successful doing that by aiming her fire at Trump and other Republicans than she would be at aiming her fire at Senator Sanders, even though he has proved himself to be a worthy foe from her, and certainly not at the other candidates who are just struggling for airtime.
Yeah, and I guess we fail to say that a great deal of the direction that this debate goes tonight comes from the way Anderson Cooper will be asking the questions and what types of questions he'll be asking. So it'll be interesting to see what he's going to be focusing on. Hunter, I want to go back to something you mentioned at the top of our interview, because, CNN is focusing and selling this debate around the two candidates, Clinton and Sanders. We know there are going to be three other candidates as well. They're running shoestring campaigns. We know that. But they're seasoned politicians. Could we expect to see a dark horse come out of here? And what do the other three really need to do to stand out?
Well, we did sort of see that in the Republican debates, where there was such a large field. And even though she was in sort of the JV undercard debate, Carly Fiorina popped out and all of the press was talking about her the next day. So I do think, certainly if you're Lincoln Chafee, if you're Martin O'Malley, if you're Jim Webb, you're hoping to be a dark horse and you don't have any money. You don't really have the same size team Secretary Clinton does. So this is one of your few chances to grab some primetime airtime and talk to a lot of the American public. So I definitely think, they're hoping to make that happen. I don't know that they can at this point.
And David, finally, we mentioned that podium for Joe Biden. Not too many people expecting him to show up since he hasn't announced whether or not he'll be running. But it's been more than 70 days since his name has been floated as a possible contender. We're hearing there's frustration even in the camp that wants him to run. At what point will his ardent supporters start to get frustrated if they're not already?
Well, I think that for Vice President Biden and his team, they're going to come out of, even though they've denied this, they're going to come out of this debate and then Secretary Clinton's testimony before the Benghazi committee and decide that if there's an opening or if she's weak enough or if she's got enough, having enough trouble in her campaign, that there's an opening for him. Going back to your last question that you were talking about with Hunter, the one thing that all 4 other candidates that'll be on tonight's debate stage can attack Secretary Clinton on is on her Iraq war vote. Vice President Biden is the one candidate which, if he gets in, cannot attack Secretary Clinton on her Iraq war vote because he cast the same Iraq war vote. So, I think there's a challenge for him in distinguishing himself for her. They're both closely tied to the Obama administration in ways that aren't always popular with the public, and they're tied to each other in their Iraq war vote. And then at the same time, he's distinguished from the other 4 candidates in that he doesn't know how to, Bianna, he doesn't have to introduce himself to the public in the way that Webb or Chafee do. But I do think that Biden has to make a decision soon. And if he does, he has to be decisive about it because his supporters and donors and everybody else that's, as this campaign really gets ramping up, is looking to see whether he's going to be a viable alternative for Democrats.
Yeah, and I think all of us, as we end this conversation, including Donald Trump, would agree that if Joe Biden did run and was part of this debate tonight, it would be just that much more interesting to watch. But of course, that is to be determined whether or not he will enter. For now, we're going to be focusing on the 2 major candidates, Bernie Sanders, Hillary Clinton. Of course, we're going to see if a dark horse comes out of the debates tonight, too. I want to thank you both for joining me.
Thank you.
And we always look forward to hearing what you have to say. So use hashtag Yahoo Live and let us know what you think about tonight's debate. And be sure to join us for our special after-hours coverage of the Democratic debate right here on Yahoo. I'm Bianna Golodriga. See you in a few hours.